Today, what are we doing here? Hopefully learning about ADUs. The goal is for everyone to come out of this with an understanding of accessory dwelling units, learning, what they are, what they, how, what the energy compliance is for ADUs, the difference between a general ADU and a junior ADU, as well as learning the differences between new construction and existing, as well as and the sort of code compliance pathways that are required for both of those. And then lastly, touching on solar HVAC and DHW, domestic hot water requirements. Oh, that's my cursor. So our agenda today, we're going to sort of run through why we need them, why do we care about ADUs, the differences between an ADU and a JADU, and then we'll run through some examples of what an ADU can look like, since there's really a wide variety of what you can do with them. And then Jennifer's going to jump into the key building code requirements, and then we'll talk about some all electric ADUs, and then close it up with a summary and a quick Q&A. So why do we need them? Why do we care about ADUs? I'm sure we're all experiencing the skyrocketing cost of housing in California. ADUs were really are being pushed pretty heavily to help address the shortage of affordable units for people, and also offer infiltration in areas where there's multifamily restricted zoning. ADUs are, we're seeing a pretty big increase in demand for them, especially with the new SB 9 that was passed recently. We're not really going to touch on that today, but the ADUs are a nice portion of that and can help really alleviate some of those housing burden that cities are experiencing, and ideally can produce some income for those who are already living on the property, and provide housing for those who need it. This handbook that's on the screen, and you'll get a copy of the slides after this, the link at the bottom. This is a really great handbook that's produced by the Department of Housing and Community Development. It covers not everything you could possibly need to know about ADUs, but it covers, it's really comprehensive. It's a great resource for architects and planning departments, as well as homeowners who want to know more about ADUs. And you'll probably hear this a lot through the training today, but please make sure that you're checking with your local jurisdiction prior to starting an ADU project, just to make sure that you're following everything that to the letter of the ordinances that are out there, and make sure that you're not missing anything. And please excuse the hammering in the background. I'm getting a new roof today. So sort of a quick primer on different types of ADUs. So there's detached, attached, and then a sort of conversion. Detached units are a unit that is completely separated from the primary structure. So it's a standalone structure. Attached is, as the name implies, it's attached to the main building. So it's they share a wall with the primary structure. And then lastly, converted existing space. So that could be something that you have an attached garage, or the master bedroom, or some sort of storage shed or something that is attached to, it could be attached or detached from the existing structure. Converting that into an independent living unit would be a sort of considered conversion of existing space. And Jennifer is really going to dive deep into the different compliance pathways that exist for both detached, attached, and then new construction versus existing a little bit later on. But I want to jump into some quick examples and show you kind of what can ADUs be. So this on screen is an example of a tiny house in San Luis Obispo. This is allowed under Appendix Q in under Title 24 Part 2.5. Basically, it says that tiny homes are allowed. They have to be less than 400 square feet. You see on the bottom image here, there's a loft. Lofts are allowed, and they can be accessed by a ladder. So we have a ladder here. It does have to be on permanent foundation, so it can't be on wheels. You can't move it around. Obviously, some sort of egress is required. In this case, an emergency exit is available through the roof access window, which I believe is here. And, again, please make sure that you're checking with your local jurisdiction before embarking on the construction of an ADU or a tiny house. Here's another example of an ADU. So this is considered new construction ADU in someone's backyard. The big thing that we wanted to point out here is you see the kitchen range hood is circled in yellow. Range hood exhaust is incredibly important for the indoor air quality of a unit, both in an ADU and in a regular single family home. The exhaust is required under the energy code to provide a way to get the air out of the kitchen. And you can also use some type of like inline fan, but we called out the range hood because it's a very nice example of one. And a fan can be useful when you're kind of space constrained, but you also have to have some way to exhaust the air. So that's why we kind of point out this exhaust hood. And, we're all aware of, you're burning something over the stove or you're cooking over gas, that you're breathing in a lot of that exhaust and the particles that you're burning. If you burn your food sometimes, which I'm sure we all do, but you want to have a way to get that out of the kitchen. I never burn food. So we just wanted to make sure that that's sort of called out here, because it's, better for the people that are living there to make sure, help make sure that we're not breathing in all those sort of yucky stuff. Here is an example of an existing garage conversion, and this is just, we wanted to highlight a lot of really cool design features in here. The sort of this table rolls and will fold into the island here. You see the big thing that we wanted to point out here is this was an existing garage. Here's where the driveway was that they turned into sort of a big wall of windows. And down here on the right, we see circled here is the mini split, which provides heating and cooling for the unit. So this is a heat pump unit. It's very energy efficient. Yeah, just wanted to sort of show, some cool stuff that you can do with ADUs. And then here's another example of an existing structure that was turned into an ADU. Just sort of showing another way that you can convert existing space into livable space with a full, whoa. Sorry about that. That you can convert existing space into a livable space with a full kitchen, and have some nice backyard ADU. This is an example of a new construction detached ADU above a garage. So in this scenario, they kept parking or added parking via a garage. There may have just been like a driveway or a pad there to park. But they also added a living space above the garage. So this helps keep, that parking space while also providing additional living space. And again, Jennifer's going to jump into this, but how this would be considered sort of depends on what was there first. So if the garage was there and all they did was add the unit above the garage, it would be considered an addition and therefore not considered new construction. But if the whole structure was sort of built from scratch, there was nothing there before, so you built both the garage and the ADU on top, that's when you're going to consider it new construction. Okay, so last thing I'm going to touch on before handing it over to Jennifer is, what are JADUs? I'm sure we've all heard of them. The sort of idea of them might be a little bit confusing, but it's a junior accessory dwelling unit. It's a specific type of conversion of existing space that can be no more than 500 square feet. and it's contained entirely within the existing single family residence. So you could convert a master bedroom into a JADU. You can add about 150 square feet of conditioned space to allow for egress. So you can't build a whole separate room and turn that into a JADU. It has to be an existing space that you're adding 150 square feet or less to create. They can include separate sanitation facilities, or they can share a bathroom with the existing structure. They can share central systems, so HVAC and water heating. It contains a basic kitchen, so it doesn't need to be a full stove, oven, and sink and everything. Sort of lastly, you need to have a door to the exterior. So the resident who is in the JADU, the only entrance cannot be just a door between the main house and the existing space. They have to have a way to get into the house that doesn't require them to walk through the main structure. So that, JADUs are a great idea if you want to have no additional stress on the utility services or the infrastructure, because it's simply repurposing existing space. It kind of provides some flexibility for both renters and homeowners who can receive extra monthly income in the form of rent. You can have one ADU and one junior ADU per property. Junior ADUs do come with a owner occupancy requirement. They either need to be in the JADU or in the main house, but an ADU does not come with the same requirements. So if you have an ADU on property, there is no owner occupancy requirement for either the main house or the ADU. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, but let me check the questions or the chat real fast. So it looks like we do have one question about the ADU above the garage. The question is, does this detached unit above the garage require a PV system? So it depends on what was there before. So in this example, they built both the garage and the ADU as new construction all at one time. The garage was not existing. In that case, yes. New construction ADUs are required to have PV under the 2019 Energy Code. And I know Jennifer's going to touch a lot on this, but if the garage was existing and all they did was add the unit, the ADU above the garage, that's not considered new construction. Therefore, the PV requirement would not kick in. And feel free to continue to use the chat if you have more questions. And otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Lauren. That was great. That question we had is probably, and I'm looking at the chat also, looks like we have another question coming in. I'm going to let Lauren take a look at that.
Sure.
One of the most common questions we have, well, there's a couple, but one of them has to do with when is PV required, when is PV not required. And by PV, I mean solar panels that generate electricity. And it's going to be helpful to tease apart how the energy code calls these different types of structures. And it's a little bit different than the way when we normally think of, from the architecture world, and even just a little bit different than the way Lauren explained it. How the energy code looks at it. So I'm going to try and tease that apart for everybody and go through some of the nuances of the energy code that are specific to additions, alterations that would be applicable to the ADUs. So probably the easiest to understand is if it's brand new construction, standalone, nothing there before, and you built this brand new structure and you're going to call it an ADU, that is going to have to comply with all the energy code elements of for new construction, low-rise residential, including the solar panels, including the PV. It will also include the indoor air quality, fans, and all that that Lauren pointed out with the kitchen hoods or an exhaust fan and fresh indoor air requirements. And you have to comply with the hot water heating, the mechanical heating and cooling part of the code. So it's really the whole thing. The energy code sees it as a brand new house, really, even though we're calling it an ADU. Now, if the ADU takes the form of adding on to an existing house or adding on to the existing structure or altering a portion of the existing structure, then it's going to fall under the part of the energy code that deals specifically with additions and alterations. And that part of the energy code, if it's an addition, you're going to go into that and you're going to dig a little bit deeper into what the code is going to require there. And we're going to go through some examples of how you might classify these different types of ADUs and where it might fall under the code. And we're going to have some diagrams that help explain that. But basically your additions, yeah, there we go. Next one, right? And so the new construction, new standalone does require the PV panels. And it hits on the envelope and the ventilation and door air quality. And it's detached and it's brand new, starts from scratch. And then the next situation we have is with their conversions and additions. And in this case, they're considered additions under the energy code. Whether you convert it or not, the energy code sees it as an addition of space, a conditioned space to an existing structure that already has conditioned space. So it could be that you've got an attached, the addition itself is new, but it's attached to your existing residence. Or it could be that you had an existing garage that was attached, but you're converting it. So that's also considered an addition. And that's the part of the code you would follow. And you could have like a shop or a garage that is a separate building. It still was there previously. And under the code for the ADUs, that's considered an addition. And it just happens to be a detached conversion. But under the energy code, we're still going to be following the portion of the code that deals with additions and alterations. So ADU additions under the energy code, there's some areas that are specific to the additions. So the new envelope is supposed to comply with all the mandatory minimum insulation requirements. There is something called a wall extension, and we're going to get into that in just the next slide. And this is probably the only part of the envelope that's a little bit nuanced. So as a plans examiner, you'll probably want to pay attention to that if you're the one actually looking at the Title 24 Energy Code forms. And the new addition has to comply with ASHRAE 62.2 for indoor air quality. So that does mean we have to have fresh air, and we also have to comply with the kitchen hoods. Probably the biggest thing to realize on the mechanical heating and cooling side of it is, yes, there needs to be a heating and cooling equipment for this new ADU, but because it's a separate dwelling unit from the primary dwelling unit, it has to have its own thermostat, and it may not share the same recirculated air as the existing residence. So the idea is that, sure, it's attached, but it's kind of like creating a duplex on your property, where you can think of it as two independent residences. Yeah, they share a wall, but they don't share their air or share their heating and cooling system. And you do have to provide for domestic hot water. And we're going to hit on some of those options in a moment. Now on the envelope, this wall extension, they have a wall extension exemption. All this wall extension is to say, if you've got this existing residence that's built out of 2x4 walls, you can build this new addition with just a 2x4 wall for the wall that lines up with the existing wall of the structure. So from the architect's perspective, homeowner's perspective, really what they're saying is, you don't have to change thickness in your wall suddenly at your addition to accommodate the code for added insulation in the wall. You can just keep your siding all in alignment, your wall in alignment, so everything still looks good. But as soon as you turn the corner and you start building the new walls, then those new walls have to comply either prescriptively or comply with the performance method. And those new walls most likely would be a 2x6 wall with R21 insulation and sometimes exterior insulation, depending on which path you took to compliance. Feel free to ask me any questions about this. This is probably one of the things we get a lot of questions about are the wall extensions and trying to figure out what that means. I do have a couple of diagrams coming up to help clarify that came from the CEC's blueprint newsletter. Really shows a good example of that. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so no, you're doing good. Thanks for moving the slide. You might be wondering, like, okay, so what do I have to do for the prescriptive components of this new addition? Well, the architects, you might crack open the code book or give the code coach service a call. And if you're going to do it prescriptively, we'd look up table 150.1a and we'd say, well, let's say, for example, you've got you're in climate zone 6. So we'd say, yeah, you're going to need an R30 ceiling insulation and a radiant barrier is required. And that's in the upper red box. Then when you come to your walls, it would switches and it says you need a U factor of, let's say, 0.065. Or maybe you're in climate zone 9 and you need 0.049 U factor. Well, what does that look like? Okay, so next slide, you've got to take a look at what those U factors translate into under the prescriptive method. And for climate zone 6 and 7, it's pretty straightforward. You would only need a 2x4 wall with an R15 cavity, but you still need to put an R4 rigid exterior insulation on it to meet that U factor or U value. And that's where you get into the issue of, if you pad out the wall with the exterior insulation, it might not match up with your existing wall. So that's why they do give you a wall extension exemption. And then for the other climate zones 1 through 5 and 8 through 16, now we're up to a 2x6 wall with an R21 batt insulation or cellulose insulation with an R5 exterior rigid. And that makes your wall even thicker. So we're going to take a look at what does that wall extension look like and really where can it line up. And I thought that this diagram they had in the blueprint was just kind of said it all. On the left, if the your new wall and your existing wall are completely in alignment with each other, you could take the wall extension exemption. And there is a place in the performance method to also take this exemption. You can check a box that allows you to use the R15 cavity and not have continuous on those walls. And as a plans examiner, I would say that's the one place I've noticed as I double checked Title 24s, where some consultants, I'm not sure they know what they're doing, or if they do, maybe they're just really not being careful, but they'll check every box as a wall extension exemption. And that won't be true. You know, it'll only be certain walls. And then when the wall jogs even just a little bit off of that existing wall, like this one diagram does on the right, then now those higher level insulation walls kick in. And if you don't want to do continuous exterior insulation prescriptively on your project, then you will need to hire someone to do a performance computer model for you for your Title 24 documents. Now, the other kind of thing you should realize is there is another exemption on these additions where you are specifically doing a conversion of a space. So whether that was already an attached part of the building that you converted to the ADU, or whether it was like an existing shop or garage that was detached that you converted to an ADU. In both cases, these are considered additions and they have existing walls. So the question comes up, what do you have to do to those existing walls? And the way the code reads right now is that if you do not remove the framing or replace the exterior frame, the siding on those walls, if you leave the outside of those walls all intact and you're just doing this remodel work from the interior, then all you need to do is replace your 2x4 wall with an R15 insulation and replace that, or add an R21 insulation into your 2x6 wall. Now, as soon as you tear off all the siding and strip it down to the studs, then it kicks it into another category of compliance. But as long as you keep all that siding and the outside all intact, and that's not including, repairs to areas where you might have to replace siding because of rot. But if you're stripping it down to the studs, then you're back into the other category of needing continuous or following prescriptive. Now, junior ADUs, just to kind of clarify, because they are within the walls of an existing residence or within the whole envelope of maybe that new construction that just includes the junior ADU with it, these spaces, also those walls would qualify for those wall exemptions, and they would be considered, existing walls and just part of the alteration. And in this case, since they're already existing, they're already like in the alteration condition space. If you disturb that wall and you get into the wall, then the builder has to make sure that they do put insulation back into the cavity, and that insulation level only has to comply with a mandatory minimum. So it'd be like the equivalent of an R11 in a 2x4 wall. So kind of recap on that. The idea is to make the junior ADUs and the ADU construction more simple. It means the code reads is slightly more nuanced, but the idea is when you're there in the field building it, oh, I didn't change the siding, I've got a 2x4 wall. Okay, I'm gonna fill it up with as much insulation as I can. That's like the best approach, and then you would meet code and do best by your client. The new dwelling units that are additions to an existing building, they shall have mechanical ventilation, airflow, and there's certain parts of the code that are applicable to it. You do have to follow ASHRAE 62.2, and the basic translation is that single family and detached new construction, they can use either an exhaust only system, a supply only system, or balanced ventilation system. But once you're into the multifamily and attached, you need to use a balanced ventilation system. And by balanced ventilation, what I mean is that you have a source of air, fresh outside air coming into the unit, dwelling unit, and you have a way to exhaust the air out of the unit. So thereby, the pressure inside the unit is balanced. In other words, you're not relying on pulling makeup air from a different dwelling unit. And if you don't want to do balanced ventilation, which is really simple now with off-the-shelf products like the Panasonic ERB and other small ERVs where it does both, intake, outlet, small duct system. If you don't want to do that, then you are supposed to make sure that your new project complies with dwelling unit air pressure, boundary sealing, and acceptance testing, which means you have to have a HERS rater come out there and test it and make sure that when they pressurize these units that they're not sharing their air back and forth, because ADUs, remember, are two separate independent living dwelling units. So I think using something like the Panasonic ERB, and I'm not brand specific, it's just that this one's been around for a while and you might be familiar with it because you could buy it as a whole unit, put it into the ceiling like you see in that picture, and it's pretty straightforward. And a lot of other companies now are making kind of similar two-piece features where you can have your bathroom exhaust fan, but combine it with a supply fan that's ducted, and they can be switched, integrated together. On the heating and cooling for the ADU, again, they can't share the same air. So they can't share the same air when it comes to fresh indoor air quality, and they can't share the same return air to a forced air heating and cooling system. So you can separate the heating and cooling systems completely, and both your ADU and your primary residence can each have their own ducted system. Or what we're seeing a lot of clients do is keep an existing ducted system intact for the primary residence, but they're going to add what's called a mini split to the new ADU. And the mini split is basically an outdoor condensing unit that provides both heating and cooling. They run a refrigerant line set to an indoor unit, and that indoor unit a lot of times is ductless, although you could have one that is ducted. And each unit has its own separate thermostat this way, and they do not share any of the return air. It's possible if you're redoing the whole project, you're redoing your whole system, it's okay if you have a specialized system where you have one outdoor unit that controls separate indoor units, as long as they can each have their own thermostat and not share the return air. This example of a project where it was really easy to run the line set under an existing raised floor. So it was slick. And this what it would look like on the inside. The two pictures on the right. The outdoor unit is for a different project, but it's, you know, similar concept where that outdoor unit, the refrigerant line goes into a ductless wall-mounted system. And then there's an example of that on the right. The line set could also go up into the house and into an attic to a small compact ducted fan coil, and you could run real simple return and supply ducts from that. And as long as the primary dwelling and the ADU each has its own system where they don't share air and each have their own thermostats, you would comply with that part of the code. Okay, and when it comes to the water heating considerations, the energy code allows for gas or propane water heating and electric heat pump options. Now, I've worked with some of the plans examiners and code officials in our Tri-County region, and we've gone around where there really isn't anything in the code that explicitly says your ADU has to have its own hot water heating system, but there are some portions of the mechanical code that some of the plans or some of the building officials have interpreted. Practically speaking, by the time you deal with the parts of the mechanical code, it's easier for a lot of homeowners just to put in a separate water heating system for their ADU and not worry about it. So we've had some situations where they've just had gas line close. They already have gas on the property and they've just run the gas line a little bit further to a small area by their ADU and put in an on-demand gas unit. And you got to make sure it vents to the outside and it has all the proper shutoffs and everything else for gas. And they've complied that way. And then we've had other clients who do not want to run gas line out to their ADU. They want to save the cost of that, and they would much rather just keep their ADU all electric. So in case you're not familiar with heat pump water heaters, I'm showing you two types. The one in the middle is called an integrated heat pump water heater, and that's where the heat pump itself sits on top of your tank of water. And that heat pump is the same kind of mechanical action that you have on a refrigerator. Your refrigerator is a heat pump. This is also a heat pump. And instead of dumping cold air or extracting cold out of the inside of the refrigerator, in this case, we're able to take heat out of the air and put it into the hot water and then exhaust the cold air. It's a little bit opposite of your refrigerator where you might feel the warm air blowing on the bottom of your feet at the bottom of your refrigerator, and it's making cool inside your refrigerator, but ejecting heat at your feet. And this flips that around. So the roundish looking little louver vent on the right of that tank would actually push out the cold air and put the heat into the hot water. It do require electrical connections, and it does require a certain amount of volume of space to work. If you don't have that volume in your ADU, you can duct it so that that cold air does not go into the small ADU, but goes outside. And then the other type of system we've seen happening more and more is this split system where the outdoor compressor heat pump has the same, all the same mechanism. It's just, it's separated now from the hot water tank. So you could put the hot water tank inside the ADU, like in this example, inside the bathroom area, very compact design. And then that compressor can go outdoors, and it can even be wall mounted. And it really simplifies the whole setup and saves space, and you don't have to run the gas line. And both of those are totally acceptable.
We have a question about
Yeah.
space and location requirements for heat pump water heaters. What are they, and what do we need?
Okay, I think Ian can chime in here. I think we have a couple of videos online that go more detailed, the specific requirements on those. But generally speaking, if you do the split system, that outdoor compressor, it only needs as much space around it as a lot of outdoor units. It's about 8 to 12 inches off the back of the wall. So it very easily fits on a simple rack system that you can mount to the wall or set on the ground. And you need a couple of feet to 3 feet clear in front of it and on the left side if you're facing it, because that's where it pulls the air in. And other than that, and to keep it clean and away from dryer lint and leaves, just like you would with any outdoor compressor unit, you're set. The indoor water tank, it only needs as much space as you want to give it to make it easy for you and the plumber to get your plumbing put in place. But otherwise, it has no moving parts, no electricity, no gas, nothing. The clearances are very minimal because it's just a beautiful tank of hot water. On the integrated heat pump, the one in the middle, you can put it in a garage. There's plenty of volume of airspace in the garage. But if you don't have a garage to put it in, you can put it in a closet, but you want to use a duct kit. And they do come with duct kits where that kit will either pull air through a louvers on a door, or pull air through a duct and then extract the heat out of that air. Even if the air is cold, there's still heat to be gotten. Can extract the heat out of that air and then exhaust slightly colder air out and to the outdoors. If you're going to put in a garage like this, the clearances around this unit, just like you see it, are perfect, because they can exhaust the air straight away without hitting a wall or any other obstructions. That's the shorthand answer. And then I recommend you go watch a couple of those videos where we've got some good diagrams and talk about some of the clearances on the 3C Rent website.
Do tankless heat pump water heaters exist?
No, they do not. The heat pump water heaters need a tank of water. They need that tank. They depend on something called stratification, where they want the bottom of the tank to have the cold water and the top of the tank to have the hot water. And they work by slowly kind of adding the hot water to the system, and eventually that tank gets warm, and there's a thermostat kind of halfway in between that tells the heat pump when to kick on and off. And it's just the nature of that particular way of creating hot and cold that they do need tanks of hot water. Okay, I think
Great.
we can
Thanks.
go on to the next.
Yeah, and it looks like Ian did put some, Ian put some a link in the chat to get more information about heat pump water heater location and sizing.
Yeah, it's
great.
Jennifer, it's the all-electric ZNE recording, I believe.
Oh, right. And
there.
And we're going to be, I think we'll go over a little bit on that again, I think next week. And we do have, I think there's another one too that's more specific to the heat pump water heaters, but I'm not sure if it's on the website yet.
All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah, and if you're like an architect and you're really trying to dig into what their requirements are on these units, you can A.O. Smith, Ream, and Sandco. You could go onto their websites and just pull their requirements, their specific requirements on each of the units. And those are the three. There's several other brands to choose from, but those are the three we're seeing the most in our area right now. So what we are also seeing a lot is that some of our clients are wanting to just have an all-electric ADU. They don't necessarily want the cost of pulling gas into the ADU. And a lot of our clients don't even want any combustion inside the ADU at all. And in order to do that, you can take a look at the heat pump technology for space heating and cooling. You can look at the heat pumps for heating hot water. And then there's a couple other things that folks are not always familiar with, but when it comes to drying your clothes, you can have clothes dryers that use the induction or heat pump technology. We also have electric clothes dryers that are available, and our cooktops. You can use electric resistance, but even better than that is induction cooktops. And if you do watch that all electric video, there's a great little clip there of how the induction cooktops work and how quickly they will cook your food. Much faster than gas, actually. And this way you eliminate the combustion, you can eliminate the gas line, which helps offset costs. And then part of the California and the whole push for California to reduce the carbon footprint is to take advantage of the renewable energy resources. We, as a whole state, are getting better and better at providing renewables into our electric grid. So an all-electric home now is actually having a reduced carbon footprint, compared to a mixed fuel code compliant home. So going all electric seems to really be the trend that California is heading towards.
And just one sort of touch on that, there are some jurisdictions in the Tri-County region that do require all electric new construction. So again, double check with your jurisdiction, but if you are building a new standalone ADU in, I know City of San Luis Obispo, definitely. There are a few others that are escaping me right now, but double check with your building department, because if you are building a new construction ADU standalone, you will have to comply with the all electric requirements.
Now this is the photovoltaic solar panels that produce electricity. This is probably one of the other areas we get a lot of questions on. And I want to just remind everybody that the solar PV requirement only kicks in with standalone brand new construction. So you can think of it as, sure, we're calling it an ADU for planning purposes, but the energy code sees it as, oh, you're building a new cute little house right next to your existing house. So it's a new structure. It's the PV requirement's going to kick in. And there are a couple exemptions to that. It could be that your new ADU is situated on the property and it's very limited in the solar exposure. So you just can't get enough sunlight on the roof, for example, of that ADU to have panels. You could qualify for an exemption that way. You could also install PVs on the main house. That's part of the permit with the ADU, and take care of it that way. It doesn't necessarily, the panels don't necessarily have to be on the ADU itself. And one great rule of thumb you can use is to use the prescriptive requirement. And I put this up here for our climate zone 4, 5, 6, and 9. Those are the climate zones that hit our Tri-County region the most, and gave you the formula and gave you an example so that you would have an idea of how many panels would that look like. So if you had a 600 square foot new ADU for climate zone 4 up in Atascadero, where I am, that would end up equaling about 5 panels of the 340 watt, DC size variety. And in this case, each panel is approximately 40 inches by 67 inches. So you're looking for space for 5 of them. So it's not a lot, but think about it when you're designing the roofs, because if it's standalone new construction, you will need to comply with this part of the code. I think the other thing to know on the modeling, which is the next slide, is when you're doing, go ahead, when the energy consultant is doing the modeling on these ADUs, they can, and you would look for that on the forms, check a box that lets you know, plans examiners know, and architects know when you get your Title 24 energy calcs done, that the accessory dwelling unit is checked as either attached or detached. And that's going to help put you on course when the energy consultant is doing the modeling to know which of these things are going to be triggered. There's a great resource on this, and this particular issue of the blueprint from the CEC is really spells it out. I think it goes into great depth. But the bottom line is, if it's standalone, new construction, everything about new construction is triggered for the energy code, including the PVs, including heating, cooling, including indoor air quality. And if it's an addition or alteration, it doesn't comply. Now, it's not applicable. Also, keep in mind too, we do get the question about mobile homes. If it's a mobile home, but it's an ADU, now does the PV requirement kick in? No. If it's truly a mobile home, i.e. on wheels, on a chassis, not a permanent foundation, it's actually subject to Title 25 mobile home requirements, then no, you don't have, then it does not kick in as new construction standalone. Like if you remember the example Lauren gave us with that small, cute little Appendix Q unit, that had to be on a permanent foundation. And that's what we're talking about. Permanent foundation, new construction standalone. Yeah. So if you have any questions on that, put it in the chat. Also, feel free to unmute. I think we've got a small enough crowd. We could take some questions that way as well. So in summary, you know, what we're really seeing is that ADUs are increasingly an important part of our California housing stock. We're getting a lot of questions on ADUs as code coaches in our Tri-County region. It seems to be a great way to accommodate more people living closer together, which in a lot of ways makes a lot of economic sense for a lot of families. I think keep in mind that if you have clients or if you're planning to do an ADU, that if running gas out to that new unit is problematic, there are great ways to go all electric, which actually reduces the carbon footprint of the whole project, which moves California towards a carbon neutral stance and reduced energy. And I think you want to keep in mind that ADUs are, you know, part of that new construction. That's probably the first thing you want to really sort out when you're looking at that. Is it standalone new construction? Okay, one thing. And then if it's a conversion of any type of an existing structure, whether interior to it or outside of it, detached or attached, then you're going to be falling under the part of the code that's specific to additions and alterations. Lauren, you want to add a summary or recap to that for us? We're ready to move into questions.
I think we're ready to move into questions. I don't really have anything else to add to that. We do have a question in the chat though. Is 100 amps enough to do an all electric ADU? And Mark, feel free to unmute yourself and elaborate on your question if we're not answering it properly.
Yeah, the 100 amps is actually a sub panel. The main service was upgraded a couple of years ago and it's 200 amps. So just one, Could we, does it have the capacity, or we would have to do like switching or have things that have interlocks so that they don't all go on at once, or how would we address that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So is the ADU new construction standalone? I mean, if it's standalone new construction, I think you're going to be required to have a 200 amp panel no matter what.
It is a standalone garage conversion. It's an existing structure from the 40s.
Yeah, then it's going to be a matter of looking at your whole existing system, and you're going to need to you have to do a calculation. You have to sort it out. You have to figure it out. So like on my own, just to give you an example, like on my own house, I'm in the process of converting everything to all electric. And my panel's only 200 amps existing. And so I recently got an electric vehicle, and I want to get rid of my gas water heater and go with a heat pump water heater. I already put in mini splits and got rid of my gas heating, but I also want an induction cooktop. So I'm having to work with my electrician to kind of sort all these things out, because each of these appliances need a dedicated circuit. We're looking to see how much space I have in my electrical box, and the previous owners had a hot tub. And so we're taking those out, and we're going to use it for the stuff I want, and the hot tub goes away. So that's, so we're kind of juggling it to see if I need to have more capacity. But that's what you'll have to do, is kind of work that out in terms of what's existing with the house, and get some specialized help. It
Do you
could
know
work,
anything
but
about
it might not.
Sean Armstrong up at Redwood Energy had put out a publication, I think, that about doing the small amperage mobile, whatever. And he had a device that he talked
Yes.
about that would not allow everything to turn on all at once, that it was more of a single draw situation than overall combined draws. Does that make sense? Am I expressing that clearly?
Yeah, Sean, yes. Sean's fantastic. If he says, oh, this is how you do it, this is how you can do it, and you can get his help to help sort it out, I would go with that. I mean, Sean, he does this kind of work, and he loves to figure these situations out for this, how to make things practical for people that maybe are limited in being able to go with a larger capacity size. And he's also very acutely aware of how some people are high energy users and others are not. Like some of the research he's done shows that some people just happen to use like 5 times more energy than a low energy use user. So I can't answer your question directly, but there is a way to figure it out.
Sure.
Sean's a great resource.
And what if you had
and a local electrician who can help you figure out the sizing on your panel could also be a great resource. An electrical engineer too.
Okay. What about if you had PV and a battery backup? Would that give you more slush, so to speak, to be able to?
It all depends on the controller system you have.
Okay.
Is it a grid fed? Is it not?
It'd be grid intertie.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to work with the company that you're interested in purchasing that equipment from to help you set it up so the controls are doing what you need it to do. Yeah, it's nuanced.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Sorry I didn't have just oh yeah, no problem answer for you.
You know,
Sorry, it was a it depends answer. Sorry about that.
well, depends is the normal answer for so many things, isn't it?
Oh.
So I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, but please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask your question or throw it in the chat. I'll maybe turn it over to Ian for a little bit, so he can talk through some upcoming events and things that we have going on. So please, keep thinking about your questions and send them over to us, and we'll circle back to them at the end.
Awesome. Yeah, that works well. I have a short questionnaire to launch. It would be awesome if I could have you all fill it out while I speak to these slides. So it should be popping up now. I'm just going to do a quick program overview of the 3 programs that we offer. So currently we have Energy Code Connect, Building Performance Training, and the Home Energy Savings Program. Next slide. So Energy Code Connect, also known as ECC, is why we are all gathered here today. This training today falls under the ECC program. So Energy Code Connect serves all building professionals. We offer services for everyone from plans examiners and inspectors to architects and contractors for both residential and non-residential application. We offer 3 distinct services under ECC. We have the Energy Code Coach, which Lauren and Jennifer are both two of our Energy Code coaches. But Energy Code Coach is an over the phone, online, over the counter, and in the field Title 24 consultation service to help building professionals navigate the California Energy Code. We also offer trainings that we sit here for today, with courses designed to increase overall Energy Code comprehension, compliance, and enforcement. And then quarterly regional forums that act as a sort of networking session covering policy and technical issues relevant to California Energy Code. We just had our fall regional forum last week focused on energy efficiency's role in housing densification and affordability. We should have that resource loaded up, or at least a recording of the forum loaded up later this week on the website. Next slide, please. So Building Performance Training, or BPT, serves current and prospective building professionals with trainings offered to architects, engineers, contractors, and real estate professionals. BPT offers expert instruction related to technical skills for building science principles and systems for high performance buildings, as well as soft skills trainings such as sales, marketing, and communication techniques in order to grow your business or advance your career. Through BPT as well as ECC, we provide professional education credits, typically AIA and ICC credits, which are both available for today. I'll speak to that in a few slides. And then we've also offered certifications in the past, such as the NAR Green Designation and Passive House Design Consultant. We're also interested in getting some feedback as to what you would like to see us offer in 2022 regarding certifications. We are anticipating offering the Passive House Tradesperson Certificate. And yeah, as I said, always open to suggestions as what you guys are looking for in the field. Home energy savings, next slide, please. So home energy savings, also known as HES, serves households that are historically underserved, including residents whose primary language is not English, as well as low-income households, rural communities, and renters. We offer flexible options with simple upgrades like LED light bulbs, smart thermostats, and power strips available for free, and then discounted upgrades that provide greater savings like heat pump water heaters, Energy Star appliances, air sealing, new windows, and installation. And then there's always no cost technical assistance available during your project. So we will be relaunching our single family program in the next coming months, but we actually recently launched our multifamily program for 5 units or more a few weeks ago. There is plenty of information and a interest form on our website if you tend to be a multifamily homeowner interested in doing some retrofit projects. Next slide. So if anybody of you are new to our network, welcome. I encourage you to, check out our website, sign up for our newsletter, get involved however you can. We did have learning units available for the training today. If you do have any questions regarding learning units, if you maybe forgot to add your membership number in registration, just reach out to me. My email is here on the slide. You will receive recording slides from today and a follow-up survey via email. I'll also include a few of the resources that we created for the forum last week. Those might be useful to you, including a all-electric case study and a frequently asked questions sheet. Some upcoming courses for the remainder of the year. This week on Thursday, we have All Electric Homes 101 on Thursday, and then the following Thursday, they're kind of split times throughout the day to appease different audiences. Next week as well, we have our Changing Climate and Evolving Building Practices. And then in December, on December 2nd, we have part of our cannabis training series for cannabis cultivators on greenhouse optimization, aligning your system with your surroundings. We're currently working on our 2022 scheduling. You'll likely hear from us via email in the next few weeks with a calendar. We have a lot of things lined up, but also always willing to take your insight. We love to hear from you guys as to what you would like us to see host. Next slide. I think that is all I have. If there are any outstanding questions, we can take those now. We do have plenty of time. I think we were slated till 10:30. So you're welcome to keep Lauren and Jennifer on the line until then. But yeah, I encourage you to learn more on our website, 3cren.org. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out at info@3cren.org.
Yeah, please feel free. I'm not seeing any new questions in the chat, but please feel free to send them over to us or unmute yourself. We'll take other questions too.
Unmute yourself, and if anyone has any stories in the field, so to speak, any ADUs you're currently working on, any ADUs you're looking at, yeah, feel free to unmute and talk to us.
Location of PV. Oops. Where can it be on the, oh gosh, sorry, I just totally closed out the, sorry about that. Let me reshare that. Can the location be on the main house for PV?
Yes, it can. So you could have a standalone new construction ADU that triggers, say that example I gave you where you had a 600 square foot ADU, standalone new construction, it triggered the PV requirement, and you calculated, okay, you need five panels. You could put those 5 panels on the main house if you wanted to. You could put those 5 panels on the new ADU. You would want to have the new panels that go onto your main house just be rolled into your permit for your ADU, so that the plans examiner could see, okay, you've met that requirement for the PV, but it's going to be on the main house. And that's fine. You can do a ground mount for that matter if you have the property for it. Oh, here's the other question that came in. Lauren, can you see that?
Yeah. Well, so actually we got 2, so I'll do the
Okay,
first
cool.
one first. Do you have any resources to help find contractors who are familiar with heat pump installations?
I do. I have my, now is this for heat pump water heaters, heat pump space heating and cooling? And is that, are
Both.
we in the business of recommending people, or is this like, give me a call later, I'll tell you who I really like?
So it looks like both HVAC and water heating for residents who may be trying to find a contractor who's familiar. Ian, also feel free to chime in if I'm not sure if 3C Ren has a good resource to direct people to.
I am looking for, so we don't, like a contractor directory is hard to find, especially for high performance contractors, but I can share a few resources that might lead you in the right direction. There's a lot of work going on in this space as to getting contractors to sign up that are experienced with heat pump water heater installs, HVAC systems, what have you. So I can send out a few future casted references as well as what I can find for a contractor directory that might incorporate our territory.
Yeah, what we're finding in our area right now on the heat pump water heaters is the builder or the client, homeowner says, I want a heat pump water heater. And then they tell their plumber, I want the heat pump water heater. This is the one I want. And the plumbers then say, okay, and they end up installing that unit. And we're not finding yet that many plumbers who are like promoting the idea that they completely know how to install heat pump water heaters. I mean, they install very similarly to a standard electric resistance heat pump water heater with just a couple little differences, but not much. And it's mostly dealing with the fact that the unit's got this heat pump, and for the integrated type. Lauren could probably show you the picture of that. The integrated type, you just need to make sure you meet the clearances or you have a way to exhaust the cool air. But like that mini split example right here on the split system heat pump water heaters, these things install easily. And there are a couple of, I'm familiar with the contractors in and around San Luis Obispo, North County. And these guys, like this unit in the middle and the picture on the left together is from a project of ours. And the outdoor unit was installed within 30 minutes, really. And then everything was hooked up. The duct work on the interior took a little more time, but every place where there was just an indoor wall mounted unit, the whole project came together in like 3 hours for that. The duct system took longer. They came out the next day to deal with the ducts, but it's pretty straightforward. And if you go with the heat pump system for your heating and cooling, my best advice is you really find out who is doing the install work. Go read the reviews, really look into it, because unfortunately, I know for a fact in our Tri-County region, we have a couple of organizations that will basically tell you anything you want to hear and then just do what they want to do. So just be careful in the sense of take the time to really find out from people who they use, did they like the work, and go see their work. And if you're in my area and you want to know who we like to use for our projects, you could contact me separately and I'm happy to talk to you. Can I say that? As part of our 3C.
I would, so it's, go ahead, Ian.
I was just going to say, I think that's about the extent of it, of what we can recommend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a few people commented asking for like contractor lists, or saying that it's difficult to find contractors who are familiar with these technologies. And I think unfortunately that's not only an issue in the Tri-County region. I think it's really a statewide problem. And I know that there are a lot of programs statewide, and I know 3C Ren's trying to do a lot of work to figure out a way to get past this. And how do we start educating contractors who are to make sure that they are familiar with these technologies, because the upcoming code cycle that goes into effect January 1st, 2023. So we have a little over a year to get everybody, really up to speed on this kind of stuff, because that is going to be, for at least for new construction, really in demand under the new code cycle. So I think a lot of people are trying to solve that problem. I personally don't have an answer for a lot of you right now of, where do I go to find these folks? Like Jennifer said, I think it's a lot of, you're unfortunately going to have to do a lot of sort of footwork on your end, reaching out to folks and reading reviews and asking to go see their work.
Yeah, on the space heating and cooling side of it, the mini splits, there's a handful of companies like in our area that's what they do. That's the bulk of it. Like I would go with them. And then there's a couple of folks who are out there that they're always in trouble. You can see that from the reviews. If you ask around enough, you'll find out that they just say whatever they think someone wants to hear, and then they install what they want to install, which is not mini split heat pump systems like we're talking about here. So in that sense, I think it's pretty easy to avoid. And then on the plumbing side of it, we're just finding that a lot of the plumbers, like a lot of the plumbers I've talked to, are really curious about the heat pump water heaters. So far they've been super open to it. They're like, yeah, I totally would install one of these, but I haven't had anyone ask for it yet. And they're also used to clients just asking for tankless gas. So they just have those in their truck already if they're going to do a replacement. Because a lot of times, think about it, if it's an existing house and someone's tank type heater goes out, well, they've already most likely got gas there. They've already, and they need hot water. It's just kind of a no-brainer to put a tankless unit there if the gas line is large enough to accommodate that tankless, that heater. If they have an existing water heater and they want to replace it for a heat pump water heater, really you want to do it before the unit fails, because in a lot of cases, you have to have an electrician come out to run the electric connection necessary, and it would be on a dedicated circuit breaker. Rheem is coming out with a unit that's only 15 amps. So that kind of goes back to that question too about how many amps do I need? How much of a sub panel do I need? So with the 15 amp heat pump water heater, that would be ideal, but to keep your amperage on your panels down. But keep in mind, you need to plan for it ahead of time, because you don't want to be out of hot water for a long time if you're waiting to have an electrician come out to run the electrical so the plumber can come and finish it. But you can also see from that middle picture, the plumbing itself is really, really straightforward. And in fact, it's easier than a gas unit because there's no gas line to run or to worry about at all. You have incoming cold water at the bottom of the tank that plumbs up really easy. Have an expansion tank you put there with it. And then you've got your outgoing hot water that comes out, and it's kind of just below the heat pump itself. So that's kind of the one that's in at the top of the top that looked like it's going through the wall. It's the top one. And then you've got condensate that comes out, like just like at the bottom of your refrigerator. When your refrigerator goes through its cycle and you get water that condenses and drops into a small little dish that a lot of people never dump because it evaporates, but sometimes it does. You will get a bit of water there and you can dump it out and then slide the little tray back in under your refrigerator. That water condensate comes something like that. It's just drinking water. It's just water from the air. It goes out, you just have to exit it out. So the plumbing on these is really, really simple and straightforward. So I think what we're trying to do is get more people aware that these appliances are available and they're easy to accommodate and to design for. And so far, our projects where the plumber hasn't installed one before, once they see like a picture like this and a diagram and they see what's going on, their response has been, oh yeah, I can install that. That's no problem.
Do heat pump water heaters need a 120 or 240 volt line?
A lot of the heat pump water heaters commonly are a 30 amp 240 like dedicated circuit, but like Ream's coming up with a 15 amp there that you could just plug in essentially. So 15 amp 120. So right. Yeah, it seems like the manufacturers realize that we need something that's pretty easy to get installed. Yeah,
definitely. So 2 quick questions. What about an ADU in a 2-story mixed use buildings, converting some commercial space to an ADU? I think they're asking, and feel free to unmute yourself, might be asking about PV, but I'm also not 100% sure. So Dwight, if you're still on the line and want to,
just in general, not specifically PV.
Is that, you mean in general, is it allowed to convert some commercial space to an ADU in a mixed use building?
Yes, and if you've had any experience with anybody who has done that.
Jennifer, I'll let you take that one, I think. You're muted, Jennifer.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to address a minor situation with background noise. So let's see, existing two-story structure, but it's commercial use right now.
Mixed use, residential and commercial.
And you're wondering if you can have an ADU?
If you've run across anybody who has converted commercial space to an ADU to residential.
Yes, I had a project like that up in Paso, but that was all worked out with the planning department and planning rules for what they were allowing for conversion of those uses. But as far as the energy code is concerned, you would comply, the energy code is applied to the residential code. If you're taking something, converting it to residential, now you're going to comply with that, space that you're converting it to. So you would want to go talk to your jurisdiction and get that conversion, that part of it worked out. And then on the energy code side of it, we could help you with, what does that particular type of conversion look like? But it would follow basically along these same types of situations that we've outlined here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope that helps.
And feel free to reach out to the Code Coach service. Our phone number we had on the screen earlier, but if you just go to the 3C Ren website, you can reach out to us there. If you have like any documentation you want us to look over, we're happy to touch base on that offline. Is cooling required in a conversion ADU, or is just heating okay?
Well, in our Tri-County region and the way the code is written for the Title 24, kind of in general under the residential code, is that you have to provide heating. It doesn't specifically say you have to provide cooling, but I am seeing a lot more of our projects consider the cooling side of it. And on the multifamily side of it, I have had clients who only, even though they use the heat pump, and by the way, a heat pump provides heating and cooling. It's the same unit. And most people don't realize your air conditioner, when you think of adding air conditioning to your forced air system, that air conditioner, that compressor unit that sits outside, that is a heat pump. It's just that it's set up to only provide the cooling side of things to your house or your ADU. So when you put one of the new heat pumps in, the mini splits, you're going to get heating and cooling automatically. If you only want heating, you actually have to have it set in the factory, typically in the factory, where they set it up so that it just locks out your cooling. So I've had a lot of clients that once they realize that, they're like, oh, okay, then they just get heating and cooling in the same heat pump, and they install it, call it good, and the new occupant of the ADU gets both. If you're concerned that they're going to use too much air conditioning and run up the electric bill, that's when you have to look at like who's really paying for the utilities, what's the intention, are the occupants going to be comfortable? There has been some lawsuits where people were just too uncomfortable in a space that did not provide the cooling, and the mechanical engineer, the person who designed the system, was found to be liable for not providing just basic comfort. So,
hi, Jennifer, this is Natalie. This is my question was about the requiring the cooling. My question was more along the lines of if we didn't do a heat pump water heater or heat pump heater. And right now we have an old an old conversion that has wall heaters, gas wall heaters.
yeah.
And so I'm just wondering how far we have to push it by changing those out.
If your project it's existing and it's existing dwelling units already, and there's existing wall heaters in good working condition that you're not touching, not replacing, not doing anything to?
Well, I can't say that part. They'll probably want to change them out. So if you touch them, does that make the difference? If you replace them, okay.
Yeah, once you replace them, then you're gonna replace it with something that meets code. And once you bring it all up to code, you might just consider a different appliance. You know, it really is gonna depend on the specific situation. But if you're wanting something small like that, I mean, we've got some projects now that are complying even with like PTAC unit, you know, depending on the situation, it's improved the performance to move to a wall unit under the window PTAC, and it's a heat pump and it provides heating and cooling. And we got rid of we were able to get rid of the gas wall heaters altogether.
Like a thing you see in a hotel room, or that
Yeah.
hotels often have.
Right. So you couldn't
Yeah,
do,
so-
you couldn't do just a small ducted FAU in the attic space?
You could do that too, but then you're running gas line up into the attic and all that business. So it might be more cost effective to do something else.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Just
if you're
option-
taking
just trying
out
to find
the,
options for the client. They're not looking, right now, the client's not interested in seeing the split systems, the fan units on the interior. And I'm not sure that they'll want the ducted, because there is a ducted split system as well, correct?
yeah, and you can also do a ductless recessed ceiling cassette. And it has 4-way throw or 3-way throw, and it's ductless and it recesses into the ceiling. We've had clients who think those are great. They were so happy they didn't have anything on their wall and it didn't bother them to see the unit, you know, just a little bit of the unit as a ceiling, you know, component. It doesn't protrude into the space because it's recessed, and then the outdoor compressor, it can be wall mounted or ground mounted or kind of hidden. And then you just run the refrigerant line to it. And it's got its own thermostat, and we eliminate the gas and eliminate everything off the walls. So we've had some clients who just thought those were the greatest thing ever. Just
Yeah, I'm
depends.
just looking for some options for that client. On a different ADU project, one of my early questions to you was whether we could use an existing room in a house and add a converted attached garage to it to create a JADU. And in that instance, I just want to clarify, we can use the existing house air and water for a JADU. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, for junior ADUs, you can. So if it meets all those other requirements in your planning and building department, it's like, yeah, that's a junior ADU, you're good. I did have a project down in Ventura where it started out that it seemed like everything was going to be good for a junior ADU. And then the homeowner wanted one little thing changed. And when the architect, they resubmitted with that change, the jurisdiction came back and said, nope, that's not a junior ADU anymore. It's an ADU, a real ADU. And so they had to decide at that point which way they were gonna, you know, go with it. And they decided, yeah, they would go with it as being an actual ADU. And they ended up adding a water heater, and they added a separate space conditioning system. So I would, if you're going to do a junior ADU too, I'd make sure it's meeting all those particulars of the requirement. Take a look at that resource and then double check with your jurisdiction. I know some of the, I can't remember if in your area, or well, maybe it depends on where the project is. A couple of the jurisdictions have pretty good resources now where they've been handing out or online on, you know, how they're kind of looking at those ADUs, junior ADUs and the requirements, and giving like one-page informational sheets on each sort of situation on the requirements, which I thought was really useful. I think it's Santa Barbara County, but I'm not sure if it was the county or the city.
Yeah, they're both different. Some of them have it, but you know, you always get that one little question mark that doesn't fit in your list, but we'll look at it. So thank you for your time. Thanks for the answers.
And feel free to, if you have more
You're
questions, Ian threw the code coach form in the inquiry form in the chat. So if you have more questions, feel free to shoot them our way. We'd be happy
Will
to.
do. Thank you
chat
very
about
much.
this.
Awesome.
You're welcome, Natalie.
All right. We're a little over time, so we'll have to leave it there.
Okay.
But thank you everyone for joining today. Thanks, Lauren and Jennifer, for an awesome presentation. You will hear from me shortly later today with some follow-up materials.
Awesome.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.